I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to Mr. Ashwin Pandya, Chairman CWC. So we'd like to hear from you. Thank you very much.
We have to really address the two aspects of the economic development, of the aspirations of the stakeholders, vis-a-vis what we can do to manage and preserve the systems that are already in place. In fact, in case of the either the rivers or the coasts, primarily we have to really look at these two aspects in conjunction with each other, rather than looking at one aspect and making a recommendation and then finding that the other aspect has been completely ignored. In many of the regulations, we do have this kind of a side effect, or this kind of an effect. Like, of course, one thing I would feel that basically, in case of the rivers, the issues are slightly different, and in case of the coastal areas, the issues are slightly different. River as a whole actually passes through many phases. It starts from even though it may be a purely a monsoon-fed river, but then generally it starts from a relatively steep terrain, and then it goes through a middle phase where it passes through a rolling terrain, or then going to a plain, and then it goes into the estuarine area. And in all these three areas, the situations are quite different. Especially from the topography point of view, also from the point of view of the human activities and the dependence of the population on that particular resource. Because we have to look at it this way, that the let's say we take the river. River is not merely a water body which is there, but it is basically a supply line which is providing certain life-giving resource to the surrounding society in order to make that society survive. The access of the society to the river by way of making in a kind of a regulation always lands into conflicts. Same situation is there with respect to the coastal areas also. Ultimately, we have to use the coastal areas in order to see that our transportation needs are met, the manufacturing and other such needs are met. If we do not have that, then we many of the things we don't have the alternatives. We in the initial phases, we did come out with a floodplain zoning bill. Floodplain zoning bill is something which is something very akin to this regulation that we are talking about, because the primary problem that was perceived at the earlier stages was to see that the certain amount of land is kept available for the river to manage the flood effects. But then it is seen that barring only say about one state or so, none of the states were actually willing. Now this is a story of something like 20 years I am talking, that nobody has adopted that particular floodplain zoning bill. That still is there. It's a piece of central legislation, because that being a state subject, we haven't been able to really put it to the states to really go through that. So that is where what I see is that a complete difference in perceptions between what the local community or local persons want and what is a desirable practice. Really, we have to really see and understand that how it happens. The situation is that basically we have to look at the population pressure. one of the very important thing that we are neglecting, or we are at times trying to sideline, is that the resources are finite. I mean, the water resources are finite, but the claimants on those resources are going up day by day, and there is no end where we can really see that end, that okay, I mean, this is the place where this particular situation will stabilize. Now, in this context, how do you really manage it? By creating a regulation, we are basically trying to ignore this particular fact. This regulation may be good in a particular context, but then the problem will be that if the additional resources which are required for the additional mouths to feed are not really catered to, then naturally this legislation or this kind of regulations will come in conflict with the people who are to implement the things. There is no way that we can really avoid that. There are certain engineering and there are certain what I will say physical constraints. There are certain contextual. The climatological constraints are there. When we look at the European rivers, or when we look at the rivers which are purely or largely fed by the monsoon and very copious groundwater interflows, and the kind of flows that we can see in those rivers, and our peninsular Indian rivers, which are dependent upon a very small portion of the year for some portion of the majority portion of the water, we can't really compare the two, and we can't really have the same thing applied to this one as we applied to the other one. The kind of regulation that one can put on a river which will have a very small fluctuation of, let us say, like 15 or 20%, and whereas here we will have a river which will have a zero flow for very long period of time, and then within few hours it will go to the maximum, something like say 25-year return period or 100-year return period, and then after 3 days you will find again the river is as dry as ever. And now how do you really put this regulation? Just by looking at the flood peak value? That is where the failure occurs. The important thing we have to do is that we have to actually look at the resource allocation, and we have to see that how much resource we can use and how much resource we can spare for others, and then whether there are any alternative means of really bringing in that resource, and for that whether any changes in this particular regulation as a blanket will have to be made or not. This is something which we have to see. For example, now, as I remember, as a preliminary reading, we felt that, in case of the Uttarakhand or in case of some other areas, it was said that no activity of any kind between, say, so many meters on either side of the river. But then, what do I do if I have to have the water there? What do I do? I can't build a dam because now you are preventing me from doing that. And if that reservoir is not there, then how am I going to supply the water for the rest of the year? So there is the regulation will have to have some kind of inherently there has to be some kind of a give and take within that regulation in order for it to succeed. We are having this problem, especially because I, being an engineer and then involved in providing the resources to the people, many times I feel that we have as a society we have to come to a particular kind of an understanding that what is it that really we want to do. Of course, the water quality issues are separate. That is another one. But a major issue is this. Now, when we relate this thing to the coastal areas, again the similar kind of situations I am encountering. Now, for that, the regulation also has to provide that by way of this regulation, if a certain kind of a pattern or certain kind of a livelihoods are getting affected, then what countermeasures this particular regulation gives, so that those measures are kind of ameliorated for those affected groups. That affected groups are not necessarily only the fishermen, but even the industries who are depending upon it, even the other facilities that may be depending upon it for their livelihood. I do not personally see that by enacting it in a particular way, we cannot simply by a diktat. It is not possible in this society to really deprive somebody of doing something. For example, now I mean we take this case of the fishing, overfishing. Why overfishing has occurred? The simple reason is that the people dependent upon that fishing activity as their livelihood have gone up. We have only two ways we can control it. One, by way of seeing to it that the additional burden on fishing is removed by providing alternative means of livelihood in some other manner, so that this particular pressure on fishing goes away, and in the process the overfishing problem also goes away. But if we don't do that and only provide a ban on fishing, then we are only accomplishing half the job. Same thing is there for many other areas as well. Thirdly, many times what is happening is that while we are evaluating the techno-economics of a particular project, maybe an industrial project or others, we are not really taking into account the costs that may occur by way of the downstream impact of that particular project. And those costs have to be properly built into the main scheme of the things. That is something which we need to do. And then, since that is a cost which is which has to have a bearing on the economics, some kind of a quid pro quo has to be established in order to see that those costs which do not become a burden on the primary project itself and create a problem of its own survival. Because after all, that particular project has got certain benefits in some other offshoot areas. Now, for example, let us take this case of the water quality and especially the industrial pollution that really occurs. It is true that industrial pollution is something which is the worst that one can do to our water bodies, and in no way it can be justified in any manner. But then the thing is that on the other side, by development of that industry, there is a certain amount of employment that has been generated. There is a certain amount of other benefits to the society has been generated. Those benefits have to somehow support the effluent treatment areas and again see that the quality gets restored. But simply by saying that we will not allow you to do this is something where I feel that this kind of disconnects are there in these regulations, which we really need to do. Thirdly, as a government, what I feel is that most of the places we have an absence of a master plan. Most of the places we have this, we come across this problem. The large-scale governmental system is primarily trying to address the problems only when they arise, or only when they perceive so. But a long-scale vision and a long-term thinking on these aspects is not there, and that does provide us with a difficult kind of a situation. Because if you have a plan of action, then within that plan of action we can simulate and see that what kind of regulations will be really beneficial, or what kind of regulations will be harmful to this plan, or how this plan can be modified so that this regulation can also be taken on board. But absence of master plan creates a lot of problem. In fact, we as a water resources engineers, and especially when we have to give the clearances to the projects, we do come across this kind of problems, because the absence of a master plan actually brings in certain amount of hydrological inconsistencies in the project development, and then justifying those inconsistencies are something which really sometimes the logic itself doesn't remain, and you realize that a particular project may not remain viable if you do some intervention in some kind at this stage. But then that is something we need to really address. The another issue which I felt that as a part of the policy one has to do is that we have to come up with a legislation in a gradual manner, rather than coming with the maximum and then trying to dilute it. In the sense, what happens is that when we are in a situation where we are not in a completely virgin kind of a setup. Some parts of the development has already taken place, some of the effects have also already come up, and then many other parts are yet to be done. So we are somewhere in the middle. So when we look at the regulation in only from one angle, then this problem really becomes a very difficult problem. And if we do that, maybe then the things will probably become smoother, because the developmental paths are something which will have to be there, and there will be certain physical constraints, there will be certain constraints of physics, there will be certain constraints of hard physical principles of science and technology, which is very difficult to really violate, and our regulation areas will have to really take that into account. So I feel that whatever discussions that have taken place, we should really look at it this way. And thirdly, I feel one of the very major problem of heartburn that even we also have is that many of the times such kind of things are done with a retrospective effect. It completely throws everybody out of the gear. This retrospective effect modifications in some of these wide-ranging regulations is something which, as a developer and as a planner, is something which I just cannot live with. A decision that has been made once, if we have met that particular standard at a particular point of time, then this kind of changes should not really make me go back and make me a violator of that particular current day standards. Somewhere some kind of rationalization has to be there. Otherwise, it will become very difficult for any development to really persist, because every time the development, if we make the regulation change at a later date, will make it more and more. Make more and more people will fall foul of it. That means we will be basically going in a negative development kind of an area. How do we really survive with this? So that is where my thinking comes, that start with something simpler and maybe make it more complex. It will be able to live with it. But then if we come up with a very complex thing and then try to make it simpler, then there will be all kinds of special cases, and then everybody will be unhappy in general. These are all some of my small thoughts about how I look at it from the other perspective. So I hope we have been you have been able to discuss these things, and then if we can have a discussion on this, there is no harm in.
We can have a few questions.
Can I ask a question, sir? About this floodplain zoning bill? Can you tell a little more, and how much it covered the river regulation zone?
Primarily, floodplain zoning bill was regulating the kind of development that can come in a floodplain, looking at the flood risks. Because especially in the our concept was that if the river is likely to flood a particular area, then in those areas some of the permanent developments should not be allowed, and these things have to be then incorporated into the urban master plans. Whenever any urban master plan or rural or any other type of master plans are being formulated, then those things have to be really incorporated in over there. But the primary area was the concern about the maintaining an adequate and proper waterway for the rivers, so that the flood that comes is able to navigate itself without creating any permanent damages or persistent damages to the economy or to the developments which are there on the river banks. This was the basic principle.
Since we had the preceding presentation of Mr. Pandya, all the points discussed, we can take it that we are closing this 2-day workshop. So thank you very much for everybody for contributing, participating, patiently listening and discussing. Thank you very much.